Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit and welcome to 15 Minutes of Game. Today we're going to be looking at something that is not brand new. It's a game that I missed out on last year when it came to coverage. It got lost in the shuffle, and I somewhat regret that. And that is amplified a little bit by the fact that I know the community manager over there. Used to be an ex-colleague of mine on WoW Radio a long time ago. And we got to talking, and the topic of this game came up. Understandably so. And she'd asked me, have you played it? I was like, yeah, I did, but I never really got around to covering it. And as a result, I felt like maybe I should at least put something on the channel. I think it would be a little bit remiss to not cover it in some form. So we're going to give it a 15 minutes of game. I already know for the most part what I think about this game, but that'll give me 15 minutes to explain why I think that way. So we're actually going to start from the beginning. I'm a few stages through, but I'd like to show you from the beginning. Plus, I really love the soundtrack in the opening stage, so we're going to go with that. Yep, that'll be fine. I'm going to play classic mode. I'm got to admit, I'm not a huge fan of the adventure mode. The voice acting is a mixed bag, and the actual story is somewhat threadbare. It's not really what I'm looking for, honestly. So I prefer the classic mode, which is Sonic-esque, I think is maybe the best way to describe it. Alright, so we get to choose from a couple of different characters. I'm going to pick the character that I'm familiar with, which is Lilac, and it's 15 minutes of game begins now. So, some people have described this as sort of a spiritual successor to Sonic the Hedgehog, and there's probably a good reason for that, because the game did begin as a Sonic fan game, but was fleshed out into its own fully commercial indie platformer. And honestly, I think a better way to describe this is it's a Sega Saturn era 2D platformer. That's maybe not the sort of thing that a lot of people know about, because the Sega Saturn didn't do all that well. And of course, there are a few games on that machine that are relatively well known or are cult classics, but the thing that system did really well was actually 2D. 2D gaming. It did that better than the PlayStation, it did it better than the Nintendo 64, it was supremely good at it. Of course, it fell flat on its face because that was the era when 3D started to become a thing. So, as a result, the Saturn had performance problems in that regard and was difficult to code for. But in terms of 2D, it was probably one of the best 2D systems to ever exist, alongside something like the Neo Geo. And as a result, it actually had a number of really, really strong 2D platformers, as well as really good ports of 2D fighting games, arcade-perfect stuff, like Street Fighter Alpha and X-Men vs. Street Fighter and all that sort of thing. And I remember playing a few of the platformers on that machine, and they were really quite good. And this reminds me very much of that. It's definitely got its Sonic aspects to it. There's no real doubt about that. We don't need that. That's for the other character type. She has a motorbike and can collect fuel for it and all that sort of thing. This is the more sort of traditional experience of being able to do this sort of spin dash. If you spin dash, once I've got my special back anyway to do it, you get a little bit of a speed boost. It's not quite the sort of momentum shift that you'd find in a Sonic game, but it's instantly relatable, regardless. But the game's got an awful lot more going for it than just being a Sonic title, I have to say. And it's really quite well designed. And I think in the era of games that claim to be retro-inspired, there are actually very few games that really get the vibe and the aesthetic truly right, that actually look like games that were developed at that time. Most of the retro-inspired 2D pixel platformers and all that sort of thing just don't look all that good because the pixel art isn't that great, At the time, you were dealing with technological limitation, not talent limitation. So there were people making the most amazing-looking stuff on limited hardware, and that, to me, is phenomenal. I absolutely appreciate that sort of stuff. And the games like this and stuff like Shovel Knight are some of the only games that really seem to get that truly right. Now, you might be wondering, why would I even be talking about the old Sonic the Hedgehog games, Sonic 1, 2, and 3, plus Sonic and Knuckles? Am I the sort of person that even enjoys platformers? No, but back then, Sonic was incredible. It was really, really good. And I still go back to play it every once in a while, and there's just something about it that I prefer over other platformers. I think it's that perfect mix of action and really amazing level design, incredible soundtrack, and timeless aesthetic. That's Sonic 1, 2, and 3 in a nutshell. Less Sonic 1, I suppose. More 2, 3, and Knuckles. And this game sort of captures that, and since then, Sega have not really been able to nail it. And I think the closest they've got would be Sonic Generations, but outside of that, things like Sonic 4 completely missed the point. The thing that Sonic did really, really well, as Mario did as well, by the way, is just exceptionally good level design, having multiple paths to go through, and it wasn't all about speed. There were little elements of speed involved in it, absolutely, but I think since then, there's been this idea that Sonic was about gotta go fast, and there was some of that, absolutely. I should boost up there again, because it looks like there's some more collectibles. There was some of that, but there was actually quite a lot of really nice sort of moderate-paced platforming. And I think that if you don't do that in a Sonic game, you are missing the point. It's not just about holding right and going as fast as possible. It's about evading obstacles, it's about slowing down from time to time, it's about exploring the level and finding the optimal route through it. And a lot of the modern Sonic games absolutely don't do that, particularly the 3D iterations. And this game does it really, really well. It focuses a little bit more on combat. You've got quite a few more moves than Sonic would have, and maybe a little bit less on power-ups compared to, say, Sonic 3. But it does have some really high-quality level design, and not to mention the fact that it looks really, really good. You know, it looks like... I'd say it looks like Sonic 3. It's got the kind of color palette and level of detail, maybe a little bit more in the background there, but it still reminds me more of those sort of Sega Saturn era 2D platformers. It's got maybe a little bit more detail than you could have managed on the Sega Mega Drive. But outside of that, it does have the vibe, and the soundtrack is so good. I'm going to shut up for a minute and let you listen to it. I've got to say, I was more of a Sega Mega Drive guy than a Super Nintendo guy, and I think it really came down to just how good a lot of the music was. I mean, Streets of Rage 2 and the original Streets of Rage still have some of my favorite tracks of all time. And of course, you know, the Sonic the Hedgehog Chemical Plant is timeless, Metropolis is timeless, all that sort of thing. This game's got that vibe. It's not just the soundtrack, it's in terms of the sound effects that are used. Something that's frequently ignored, perhaps, when dealing... I've got to push it under there, don't I? When dealing with the creation of retro-style games. And you can say, oh, it's got a great soundtrack. You know, Shovel Knight's got a great soundtrack. Meat Boy has a great soundtrack, even though it's not so much of a retro platformer. There's plenty of games that have great soundtracks, but do their sound assets hold up as well? The sound effects are often ignored. You know, you need some nice, satisfying sound effects that really give you that big nostalgia boon from the older generations of consoles, and this game does that really, really well. It doesn't overdo it with modern sound effects. It has nice little satisfying pickup noises and all that sort of thing. The speed noises as you do a little spin dash sound great. All sorts of things like that. It's exactly the sort of thing that I would be looking for if I was trying to find a truly retro, not even just retro-inspired, retro-faithful. You could say retro-inspired, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you get it, you know, that you necessarily understand how to truly make a game that is reminiscent of times gone by, but this title, you know, it nails almost all of it, you know, from all these little creative little mini boss fights every once in a while, to the awesome changes in soundtrack, to the solid moveset and the great movement system, and even just really good quality animation. You know, not overdoing it, just really well-drawn sprites and really good animation. That's what a lot of these retro-inspired games truly lack. It's like, well, your game's got pixel art. Yeah, but does your animation quality hold up? Probably not. Because it takes a serious degree of talent to actually create this sort of stuff. Anyone can make lo-fi graphics. It takes a great deal of effort to make something look good while deliberately limiting your technical options. That's That's a work of art, in my honest opinion, and there's very few games that manage that. And when they do manage it, you know, again, like stuff like Shovel Knight, then that's when I get truly impressed. You know, I really like pixel art. I think maybe you've got the wrong impression from the last couple of years of coverage. I actually really love pixel art. I truly appreciate it when it's done well. But the problem is, most of the time, it's not. It's not. And then, you know, you get some good stuff like Scott Pilgrim. You get some good stuff like Mercenary Kings, obviously, I think by the same developer, if I recall correctly. And then it's like, yeah, how talented these guys are. Because, you know, a game like this is going to look good 20 years down the line because they just created a great aesthetic that doesn't really date. No, it's technically already dated, but if you go back and play Sonic these days, the older Sonic games, you don't think, oh god, these graphics suck. No, it's like, wow, this still looks great because it's colorful and it's got its own unique style and it holds up, and it's always going to hold up. And I think games like this are very similar in that regard. It's telling me to go this way. I can't exactly remember why you do that. Maybe I have to pop down here. Like I said, the level design is really quite creative. And that's impressive to see. It's very easy to just press right. It's like, hey, look, there's secrets under here. And it's not necessarily logical that you would go and have a look at that. Because in most other platformers, it was like, no, no, no. There's only one optimal route. Don't explore. And I love that exploration aspect, and it's not really done all that often. Kind of bothers me. But this, I mean, this is, it's truly impressive, honestly. It really, really is. It's so surprising to see a game like this. And I know it didn't do quite as well as Shovel Knight. I think Shovel Knight got all the acclaim. I know, you know, a reasonable number of people picked this game up, but maybe not as many as it deserved. I know they've got some more content coming out, and I think they're working on that Wii U release at the moment. It should hopefully do pretty well there. It's just really, really nicely put together, isn't it? So easy to appreciate something this well built, this well made. And I think it speaks for itself when you watch it, in that regard. It's not a game you really have to convince people about. You just need to show it to them. It's like, hey, were you alive when the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo were making classics? Were you alive then? Were you playing those games? This game might be pretty reminiscent of all that stuff. It's like it is. It really, really is. Can I get up here? Yes, I can if I'm quick enough. There we go. A couple of levels on are pretty nice as well. It's got some very impressive boss fights and some really creative levels that have sort of little platforming puzzles. Nothing too crazy. Nothing that would keep you stuck for too long, I don't think. But I like the fact that the game slows you down and forces you to have a look at your environment and figure out exactly where to go next and sort of try to figure out what the game logic is behind the level design. There was a lot of that in the later Sonic levels. The early stuff, you know, like Chemical Plant, that's fairly easy to deal with. But when you're dealing with stuff like Wing Fortress and the later levels in Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles, there's way more trying to figure out exactly where to go. Okay, that should smash that. There we go. Now we can go down. Wonderful. You know what I'd love to see, actually? Yay, air. Does it have the... I want to know if it has the panic noise when you're running out of air. I'm looking at my air supply there. It looks like it's pretty high. Oh, there we go. Okay. We should stay underwater and see if it has a panic sound. That would be amazing. That gives me some serious flashbacks to playing Sonic when I was younger and going... Ah, damn it. Didn't mean to do that. Oh, well. Getting into a colossal panic on Chemical Plant when I spent too long underwater, or was it Aquatic Ruin, I think, as well. There was a little bit of that in Hydro City. Hydro City had some killer music, come to think of it, didn't it? Damn, I need to start listening to that stuff again. I think it's why I really enjoy Sonic remixes on OC Remix more so than maybe any other game, because that music is so good, and if you update it a little bit or do a little bit of a different spin on it, it can be absolutely fantastic. You know, there's your little speed section. You don't need to overdo it. But it's nice to have it every once in a while. You can avoid that. There we go. Oh, God! Okay, that's weird. I didn't really expect that to come back. I thought I'd avoided it. Evidently not. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Bugger off. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's really hard to argue with a game of this sort of level of quality. Now we're on the ceiling, of course we are. I think there's a boss fight coming? Yeah, there we go. Really, really hard to argue with it. So well designed. You know a game's got something a little bit special when it's a platformer and I'm saying, yeah, I want to play more of it. But I think that the old style of design of platformers is perhaps gone. I think with a lot of platformers in particular these days, either you're doing deliberately puzzle platform stuff, or you're making stuff hyper difficult and deliberately brutal to appeal to that sort of masochistic crowd. Which you don't necessarily have to do. That was never me, so that's probably why I don't enjoy this current bevy of indie retro-inspired platformers, because they are super hard for the sake of being super hard, more often than not. This isn't all that difficult. It's just enjoyable. There we go. I mean, it's got time trials if you want to bust through stuff, but there you go. I'm going to quickly jump onto the other level I was on, because it reminded me a little bit of Casino Night, although obviously with a much different theme. Oh, we unlocked some stuff as well, which is always nice. Relic Maze is kind of cool, but I do really quite appreciate... Where is it? This one? There we go. This particular level in terms of its design. Fortune Night is what it looks like here. Doesn't it give you that Casino Night vibe? I mean, it's obviously not the same, very much so, and it's got the sort of Oriental-inspired theme to it, but it reminds me a lot of that regardless. A lot of stage variety in this as well. And, of course, great music to accompany it. Just finding little new platform mechanics and little creative things that they do with it. It's really quite enjoyable. And then you get your little bit of speed up every once in a while, and then you slow down, figure out what's going on, try and get a collectible or whatever. There we go. I'm sorry, that looks a little bit ridiculous. She looks rather worried. It's like, what's going on here? I'm not 100% sure. She realized she left the oven on. That's probably it. That's exactly how I look. I was like, damn it. Come home and it's just smoke everywhere, burnt pizza. It's disastrous. I want that chest. There we go. What is in it? You know, if I had any real complaints about it, it would maybe just be... I really like power-ups, and this game doesn't have a great deal of them. I think it gets away with it because it's got an actual moveset in terms of its combat. It's not a case of just jumping on people. You've got the spin, you've got a punch, and then you've got a sort of dragon punch combo, and you can also do the speed-up attack, which will also do damage and give you temporary invulnerability. So I think that really you don't need a huge set of power-ups when you have more than one attack move. So I think you can kind of get away with that. Which is why I think the Sonic comparisons are maybe apt in some ways, especially in terms of aesthetic and level design, but in the way that it actually plays, that wouldn't be entirely accurate. It's super impressive, though. It really, really is. It's just a really well put together platformer that gives me some excellent nostalgic vibes. And I'm not necessarily the sort of person that indulges in nostalgia all that often. Maybe it's because I didn't own a console as a child. You know, to play these games, to play Sonic, I actually had to go over to my friend's house. So I only got to play it like once a week, and we'd play Golden Axe and Streets of Rage and all that sort of thing. So nostalgia doesn't generally get me in the same way that it gets other people, but in this case, it's hard not to appreciate it and really get the impression that this is one of those few studios that actually understands what made those games good, and it doesn't miss the point in that regard. And plenty of other studios absolutely miss the point, which is a shame, actually, because if more platformers, retro-inspired games on Steam were like this, then I would be looking forward to playing them rather than dreading it every time I get one in my inbox. So much detail, so many little things just to pack the level full of action and always keep you guessing as to what's going to happen. Just those little details, you know, do those birds have any gameplay purpose? No, but that's the sort of little detail that you would have found in a game like that. Which made those levels feel alive. It made them feel like they weren't sterile and just there for the sake of traversing. I dig that a great deal, you know, even the little bits of background detail right there. There we go, get up some speed. That's what I like to see. That's not to mention, by the way, that the game has a few other characters which have completely different movesets and different ways of traversing things as well, so it's worth noting that too. Anyway, have I waxed lyrical enough about Freedom Planet yet? All I'm saying is that this game is one of those few titles that captures the aesthetic of the true classics and has really solid gameplay to back it up. It doesn't rely on being retro as a gimmick. Now, it holds together right now, just like Shovel Knight did. Just like certain other titles, like maybe Mercenary Kings does. And every time a game like that comes out, it's worth stopping a second and appreciating what they've accomplished there. So if this is the sort of thing that you're into, then Freedom Planet, ladies and gentlemen, you know, go and have a look at it. It is available on Steam and Axiom Esports sponsor GOG for $15 or your regional equivalent. And now people can stop pestering about Freedom Planet. There you go. I finally got around to playing it. Yes, I really do genuinely think that it's great. And coming from me when it comes to platformers, you know, the game's got to have something going on that is beyond the norm. There you go, folks. Freedom Planet. My name's been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching. And I'll see you next time.